Okay, hello everyone. Hello everyone. So I hope the sound is good. Let's see. So let's see. So the present board position black is attached at the side here. Um, I didn't expect that move. So I think the idea is basically if white does something like, let's have white play, let's do a diagram. White does this, maybe black's thinking of playing here. In which case, oh great. So yes, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's probably late night for some of you, or maybe most of you. So if this happens, then the exchange of the marked black stone for white one is good for black, just because black gets to push through here. Maybe black would play on this, even if black plays on this side, it's good. So yes, so white would then follow up with something like this. And yeah, so in a way, I'd guess it's functioning. That's probably the general idea that black has. So this game, the 11th round of the Nongshim Cup. So this is a tournament where there were 3 teams of 5 players each. Okay, so yeah, they're playing that very easy. So three teams of 5 players each. So there was a Japanese team, and a Korean team, and a Chinese team. And so after 10 rounds, at this point, there are 2 Chinese players. So there's KJ, who's playing today, and there's Gu Jihao waiting. And for Korea, there's 3 players. That's so there's Park here playing today, and he beat Iyama Yuta yesterday. That was it was an exciting game. Turns out Park was he seemed to have a fairly good lead after the first fight, so I guess he did well in that game. He's probably in good form right now. It looked like a good game to me. And then there's Shinjin, so of course he's probably going to be coming last. And also there's Byung Sang-gil, who will probably be the next Korean player in line if Park loses, that is. So this is a pretty important game for China and for KJ because in order to play against Shinjin, so it looks like KJ might have to win 2 games. And then it would be the final player is probably going to be Shinjin So. So let's see. Yes, so in this variation, black doesn't have anything much better than to connect. And white will connect on the second line. Black does get to put a cut in on the second line. So like for instance, if white captures that, now this is a problem for white. So this is not really going to work very well. It's going to be good for black. So white will have to answer on this side. And black does have some potential to squeeze just a little bit. So there is that. So like white can play here, or white could play here, but black will get some extra squeezing potential. And black doesn't have to play that yet. All right. So that's the local position. Looks like they're pausing a bit. The time control in this tournament is 1 hour each. And they seem to be fairly even in the way they're using their time. And it looks like they've used close to 20 minutes. So like something like 18 minutes for each player. Okay, didn't expect that one. So basically, white can just take whatever he wants. Black's trying to go for a kind of a light shaper. So white could play that move, yes. And black is just sacrificing everything. And he might be thinking of moving back to the upper left area because that's an area that could be dominated by black. In fact, it's the one area that could be dominated by black. So black might be thinking of attacking the white group in the upper right a little bit, and building the top side or the upper left part of the board. So that's the area that black has some potential. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the early parts of the game, just to show you how it came about. For those of you who came in between, I might get some opportunities to talk about the game too. So KJ plays what looks like an old style opening. There was a period when people didn't play this tight Simari, the corner enclosure here, because when they played it against Master, the Master version of AlphaGo, they got beat up pretty badly. So there's a tendency for black to be slow in development when black plays the tight Simari here, and AlphaGo would be playing moves like this against it, and black would be answering too much, and AlphaGo would be winning by with positions like, for instance, like this, where black would be playing a lot of moves and getting a bit too tight of a position. So that's the way we used to play this. So that's the excuse for the players who did that. They were world-class players. All of the players who played against AlphaGo in that 60-game series, and they all lost. They were all on the top 50 professionals in the world ranking. So they were the best players, but they were still playing this kind of style, so they lost out. So the difference is that nowadays, if white plays something like that, quite often black will not answer directly. So black will be playing elsewhere, just completely some other part of the board. If black has a position on the top, sometimes black will be playing something like this. Or if the left side is important, sometimes black plays a move towards the left side. So it depends on, in this board position where there's nothing, black would probably just play away and leave it for the time being. So the way we handle the shoulder hit here has changed. And I think that's what has made people feel okay about playing the tight Simari again. Okay, so here, yeah, the old Joseki, yeah. Okay, so here white plays a pincer and plays the large nice move. So this is probably a bit new and different for most of us. And it turns out white doesn't really worry about the 3-3 point invasion so much. So one typical variation, if black jumps into the 3-3 point, is here, and like this, and like this. And so it sort of resembles the Joseki where, for instance, black has jumped into the 3-3 point in this position. It's very similar. Only people don't do this very much anymore because it's supposed to be okay for white. So this is a position that a lot of computers seem to like it for white. And so I'd say maybe black was avoiding that. And there's also the ladder when white plays here. So in this case, it's that white stone in the upper right there that has to do with the ladder. So the ladder I'm talking about is this one, where the move that white has to worry about is black 3. So like if black plays something like this, then it's a lot better for white, just because black has a kind of a flimsy shape in the corner and has to worry about the 2-2 point. Or on this board, it's the B18 point. And so the move that white has to worry about is this one. So first of all, if white plays like this, and black chases it, white captures the corner in this case, and connects up to that stone on the side in this case. So that's how it works. And if black plays here and plays here, it looks like black can win the race to capture. So for instance, if white plays here, black has 3 liberties in the corner and white has only 2. So this is where the ladder comes into play, and the ladder favors white. In fact, it goes right by that pincer stone. So like if the pincer was one line to the right, then it would be a different story. Yeah, so it just slips right past that pincer stone. And, well, white's chasing the ladder, so that white doesn't really need a stone there, but it's missing the black pincer stone, and it's going to hit the white stone. So black played away. So this was played fairly quickly. I'd say both players are still in their preparation here. They still have researched this with computers. Okay, so this is a move that I've been seeing a lot recently. Like when I started to study with AlphaGo, and I think I was using Lila 0 at the start, but I like AlphaGo better now. I don't remember seeing this move so much, but nowadays I see it a lot. So that could be something that's changing in the weights that the programs have. And black gets into the corner like this. So the move that we used to play a lot, well, there's two moves actually, so let's go through it. So one move that you have to think about is this one, in which case if white covers from above, then black is threatening to break out like this. So this would be a fairly good way for black to break out. Or if white pulls back, black is getting into the corner. So this is a kind of almost a joseki-like shape where black can live in the corner. And it works in this position. Basically the keystones here, the stones that you have to notice, are this pincer here on the left side. The star point, the black kakari, the pincer, and then white plays this attachment on top. Then there's always the potential of this variation. So where black is threatening to go into the corner. Problem with it in this board position is that the ladder favors white again. So this time we need that white stone. Yeah, I'm just checking the ladder. Yeah, so it's going to hit that white stone in the upper right corner. So when black chases the ladder, white can actually escape. And in this variation, this white stone at G17, it's in a pretty good position. White needed something like that to capture the two black stones. And it's sort of like a net shape. It's a pretty good place to have the stone. So I'd say white's pretty happy about this, just the fact that usually if white can escape the ladder is good, and white's stone at G17 wasn't in a weird position, so it's working for white. Okay, looks like the game is moving a little bit, but I think I can still talk about it on the way. So the move we saw a lot was this one, with the idea that if white answers in the corner, then black has a threat of a cut in the corner, or if white defends the corner, black can break out. So this would be good for black. And white's going to play here. And this was actually played a lot. The problem with this for black is that white's position on the left side there, it's a very strong position. It's going to affect how white invades the upper left area. And black's not alive yet, so if black is playing away, white can still kill it with this. So black still needs to protect that. And so it's not very good for black. So when black plays this move, this is the game move, and if white tries to revert to that, then black's going to play here. And in variations like this, so for instance, if something like this were to happen, then obviously it's better for black not to have this exchange played. So if black had started with the attachment at C16, it would have been more like this, where in this variation, black gets to play an Atari from above. So that's how the komi here, it generally is better than the attachment that we used to play here. And so yeah, so if white plays something like this, this is going to be a headache for white. It's actually pretty difficult for white to win the race to capture in this variation. So this is setting up the hane at 4. And white just pulled back. So let's get back to the game. So white pulled back. Locally, this is really great for black. White does have a fairly strong shape on the outside, so it's close to even on center. Okay, here, black played here. So this is a variation. It was played a lot in ancient games. Well, a little bit in ancient games. Goseigen liked this move in general, but I'd say he played it more often without the knight's move here at p6. So if you don't want to get into that variation in your own games, if your opponent plays like this, it's okay to pull back. So pulling back is not necessarily bad, and locally white can make a living shape here. So in this case, just locally 3 and 4 are Mii, and white does have enough shape to, I'd call this a living shape. White has enough room. If white curls around here, white's threatening to capture the one stone, so white has a living shape anyway. But instead, when black plays here, this is actually, the whole thing here is a joseki, where white gets to cut off that black stone on the right side. Black has a fairly strong shape in the corner, and he played a honey underneath. So otherwise, black could have played here. And this would be sort of hoping, sorry, not that way, hoping for this kind of thing. And black would be taking more territory on the top and be giving up that one stone on the right side. Thank you, PhD Tony. Thank you for your donation. So compared to this, which is close to even, when black plays underneath, black's plan here is to, he's not giving up that stone on the right side so easily. So like if white had played here, then black would have, black would still have ideas of kind of pestering this white group and using that as an entrance to get into the right side with 5, for instance, or more generally to get into the whole area here where white has a moyo in the lower right part of the board. Black's trying to sort of make that white group in the upper right, although it's not exactly weak, but sort of chasing it around, using that as a way to try to get into white's area on the right side. And so it's similar to what he did in the actual game. Well, yeah. So like the idea again is that black's gonna, if white cuts here, I guess black's gonna use one of these forcing moves at some point. So I'm not sure which one. He might leave it for the time being. We see this kind of move a lot. In which case, if black's gonna play something really active like this, then black might be leaving the 2 atars, so to be able to choose from above or from the right side. So it's not clear to me which is going to be better for black. And in some cases, it's good just to leave it and have both options, because either way, it's going to be a clearly forcing move in most board positions. So instead, white plays on top, and it's getting exciting here. You can see that the white group is not 100% yet. And so let's see, what do you think happens if black escapes from the ladder? Okay, so if black escapes from the ladder, it's going to be a net. And this is a ladder. So this is actually, it's a different ladder. So it's this ladder going off towards the white wall. So that obviously that's gonna die. Yeah, it's a net. It's a net and a ladder. So although the ladder towards the top side doesn't work, the net towards the top side, and the ladder, eventually it's going to be the ladder towards the lower left. So that's how that was working for white. Yeah, and so this is a kind of a strange move here, because it's not forcing, but just playing there, it does create a lot of forcing moves for black. So when I say it's not forcing, playing something like this to start with is probably not very satisfying for black. So like black has played a lot of Ataris, but does not have such a great shape on the outside. So that's why in the game we were seeing black doing stuff like this, trying to make that same sequence more effective. So by having that exchange of 1 and 2 there, black is actually breaking through the white stones, making it much better than if that exchange was not there. So yeah, so in this case, black is putting a lot more pressure on the white group there. Or black can cut here. Cutting here is also an option. So that's the idea with the move that black was playing later there. I didn't really get this move. It took me by surprise. But it does happen to be a ladder breaking move. So for instance, say white plays here. Now black can escape. So if white plays here, although this is not pretty, it's sort of an ugly shape. If black escapes, white's shape is not so good either. Like there's cutting points all over the place. And actually white has to worry about this cut on the third line also. So in this variation, white's going to end up losing that group on the right. So there's too many cutting points for white to be able to defend. So like if white plays here, this would be bad too. So actually that squeeze didn't do white very much good. It wasn't good enough. And so white answered here. So that's stopping black from escaping there. I guess for the time being, this looks like this white group is going to be okay. So it's okay, but maybe not 100% alive yet. So there is the idea that black will be trying to surround it while building the top side. Okay. So black played here and pushed through. So I talked about this a bit earlier. Yeah, so if white plays here, this is a move that would be most greedy, but black is going to get a good shape by breaking through here. After that, maybe just cut here. It's going to be good just about wherever black plays. It's probably good for black because this was an area that started as a white position. So white plays here, obviously. All right. Okay, so those are the moves that I missed. So let's get back to that. Okay. So curling around here is big. If white had played the same point, it would have been putting some pressure on the corner. So obviously not big enough to play now because black is not 100%, is not going to die. It's not as if black is going to die here. Black does have a living shape on the side, but it's a pretty big move. Kind of a waiting move for black. I probably wouldn't play that. I would probably be looking for a way to attack this white group. So something to do with this white group or a jump. Trying to put some pressure on the white group and build the top side would be my first idea. So it's taking territory. So it's a big territorial move. Let's see. Black has some territory in the lower left corner. In the top right corner, has a tight shimari in the top left corner. So I'd say black probably has an advantage in territory. White's only real territory is in the lower right area. That's somewhere a bit more than 20 points. So it's a pretty big territory, but black does have some territories all over the place. D18. Yeah, he's sort of waiting. Like, I don't know if at this point in the game he's really, like with a computer you would get a point score, which would say one side is better than the other. But at this point in the game, like that point score, even if it's something like 70 points or something, it's going to represent a very small difference, like 1.5 points or half point difference. So most players don't really worry about that and are playing moves that they like. So maybe he just likes to take territory. Okay, so white plays the shoulder hit. You can see white is reducing the black territory. Yeah, so, okay. Page 16. Okay, so that's Ed Helen talking about white's position on the lower side. Black does have a lot of options to reduce it, and the lower side is no longer a big concern. Like, it's not as if white's going to try to make much territory there. It's going to come a lot later. So the idea is that this white group is strong, it's connected up, and pretty well linked to white's stone on the side at K16. And it's not really a territory, it's just a position that white has there, a strong position. In fact, if anything, white's territory is probably going to be on the right side of that, if white can find a good way to capture this black stone at N16. So that's where white's going to get more territory. Hopefully, white would be thinking of attacking black's group in the center, or at least putting some pressure on it to get some territory on the lower side. So that would be where white's territory will increase. Of course, white's corner territory is big enough already. So all of that is relatively less important when we compare it to the top side, the top left area, which is still sort of wide open, not decided yet. So you could say that black's move at D18 it erase the bottom side to the extent that both players are not really interested in working on it anymore. Like it's taken away a lot of the joy of white making a territory there. So white's not going to try. So there was that effect of black playing at D18. Okay, black is trying to attack on a large scale here. When black plays the jump here, suddenly I get the feeling that the invasion at I-17 is a bit more important now, because it would be putting some pressure on this wall that white has. So like walls are strong, but they don't always have two eyes. So in those cases, black can be thinking of invading on the third line on the bottom side. So that would be I-17. Okay, this is a bit wild. So they both played pretty subtle moves here. So like when white plays the peep here, white's trying to give black relatively heavy shape. And it wouldn't have been a big deal if black had simply connected. So like if in doubt, it's okay if you're playing and your opponent peeps. You don't have to worry about people saying like you never connect or you always connect or stuff like that. It depends, and in this case it's probably a very small difference. So black could have connected here. It would be slightly, to a certain degree, it would be a heavy shape. So what we call a heavy shape is when you've lost some of your mobility. So depending on the position, sometimes black would want to be playing a move like this to have a potential connection underneath. Sometimes black would want to play a move like this. So black has various options here, and the idea with white's peep here is to make black choose at this point, so to fix black's move. So now when black pushes on the top, if white pulls back, then even if black just connects here, that exchange of the marked black stone for white 1 has been good for black. It's a black stone on the outside, taking one step towards the center of the board, so it's helping black connect up to that group on the right, and forcing white into a tight spot. So that exchange of the marked stone for white 1, it looks good for black. However, there is the fact that sometimes white can push through here. So pushing through here would cut, it would create 2 cutting points. White does have to worry about the ladder there. So it would create the potential of cutting black off like this. So if white gets into trouble, white might be thinking of using that. Or if black plays on this side, it might be a variation like this to reduce to a certain degree. So that's how it sort of connects up to the next move white played, which was here. White's proposing kind of a trade where maybe white's going to sacrifice these stones on the left side. Let's see how they actually played it out. Oh, so that's how it's turning out. Okay, so when something like this happens, looks like white didn't give up so easily there. But just assuming, say something like this happens and this whole white group is dead. Well, maybe this is not going to work anymore, but at least white has moves like this. In the case that black does this, this is going to be bad for black. So there's a cut on the 5th line at e11. And also those stones on the left there, the black stones are in danger there too, obviously. So that's not working. And white can chisel away some of that territory on the second line. So stuff like this would be one way that white could reduce the loss when white has lost those stones on the left side after making a trade for living on the top side. So that would be how that peep at d9 was working for white in this variation. Potentially white's going to be thinking of sacrificing something. Of course, another option would be just pushing through, and cutting would be another option. So in this case, black would sacrifice like this, or like this. So something like this would the general idea of how white's going to reduce the area. White has moves like this, so it might be better to play the attachment on the second line, but in either case. But instead, he did that now. Okay. So it's the same idea. I guess I wasn't so far off. So black played an Atari. And yes, so this is the Tetsuji here. And I could have made it a problem for you guys. When black plays here, this is making a miai of the cut on the left and pushing on the top. So if white connects here, black can play here. If white were to play, I'd say maybe, so if white plays here, black can cut here. Maybe black can even play here. It might be more strong. With that stone on the right, that looks like it could work. If I were white, maybe I'd play here. It looks a bit dangerous, doesn't it? Black is okay in the corner, so it looks like white's cut off and in danger here. So that's how the peep here works. If black had not played that move, then white would have been... white's pretty much alive when white plays it. So that's a living shape. Okay, Bugkin is asking, is Park the last Korean before Shin and K the last Chinese? So actually, there's some more players. Like there's 3 Korean players and 2 Chinese players. And so there's KJ. If KJ loses a game, then the next player, the final player, is Gu Jihao. And I haven't given the ranks. They're all 9 dans anyway. And if Park loses a game, then I assume the next player is Byun Sang-gil, but there's 3 players, so we don't know for sure. So it's Byun Sang-gil and Shin Jin-seo, obviously. Yes, that's right. So Ed Helen wrote it out for us. Yes. Okay, so back to the game. Okay, so black played the peep, and white peeped here. So when white peeps here, if black answers that, that's going to allow white to connect. So that's the idea here. White does win by a 1 move difference. Or sometimes white would be able to extend here. It might be slightly better to extend if black connects to connect. Or if black cuts here, white can push through here. So this doesn't give white any eyes. And that would be the worrying thing about this. If something like this happened, maybe the whole white group is going to die. So it's probably better for white just to connect in this particular case. Okay, so black cut there. So white was looking at the cut here, and for some reason he didn't play it yet. So if white cuts here, yeah, black does, oh yeah, it doesn't really work. So white does have this forcing move. So maybe it's just this much, maybe not worth playing yet. White did have this forcing exchange that he could have played. Maybe he wasn't sure that it would be forcing, because it doesn't go very far for making eyes for white. For instance, if white plays here, black still has this move, which would take away, it would make it a false eye. So white does have to be careful about the life or death of this entire group. And we have to remember this group that white has on the right side, it's not 100% alive either. So it doesn't really have the two-eye shape yet. So white immediately played here. Okay, so now white cuts. Okay, Lino Walker is asking if white can save the group in the upper left. That's pretty much the game. And, you know, maybe, but, I can't say that's not true now because, like a very subtle difference, if you look at it with a computer program now, a very subtle difference is the game. And so, like, if it were AlphaGo playing, maybe the answer would be yes. But when humans are playing, it's not so true, I don't think. So I wouldn't really say, especially in this game where there's a relatively, for games at this level, for World Championship games, 1 hour apiece is a relatively short time limit. And they've already used a good portion of their time. Here it looks like KJ has slightly more than half an hour, and Park has only about 20 minutes left. So they're going to be getting into overtime at the late stages of the middle game, it looks like. It's going to be a pretty important stage of the game. And so they, and how they deal with the BOME is a problem. So that's going to be that could be more decisive than a relatively small difference at this point in the game. Okay, so there's a kind of a potential ko there. I wonder if it's going to happen. They do like to play kos. Strong players like to play kos. Okay, people are talking about how Bug Kitten is talking about how KJ played AlphaGo 6 years ago. Yeah, it was 6 years, I guess. Something like that, yes. And that was when AlphaGo was had already established that it was stronger than humans by beating Lee Sedol. And we sort of knew how it was going to turn out before the match was played. But yeah, I guess he was close to his peak still at that point, and was probably peaked out slightly earlier than that. If I recall correctly, he wasn't number one in the world ranking anymore at that point. So yeah, he's not in his best form now, but of course, for a long time he was the world champion, and so he's still a very formidable player. So he's sort of the best bet for China at this point, although Gu Jihao is also a top player. Okay, so August Leo is asking, is this the style of modern Go? And it's not really that different in the middle game. In this game, black is taking a lot of solid territories. So black is taking territories while white has a kind of relatively loose position on the lower side. But it's on the whole, the fact that black is taking solid territories and the fact that white also, once the top side is finished, white's going to have solid positions all over the place. So especially this shape on the left side here, where white has taken the two black stones, that's pretty much a living shape. I'll just show you the exception here, where if black completely surrounds it, black can play here and squeeze and play here. So this is a relatively small move as far as territory is concerned, but it does give white a dead shape. So this is the way that in some cases black could kill this group. Of course, it's pointless to be playing this and exchanging it for something outside. So before black does this, black has to completely surround that white group, and then it would be, maybe it would be worthwhile. It has to be a killing move, basically. So it's a bit far off, but there is that. In most cases, this white group, I would call it alive, just because white pretty much has an extra eye in this general area. Obviously, all the black groups are going to be alive also. So everything is safe, and the only uncertain area left is the bottom side. So it's, I wouldn't say it's really that typical of modern Go, in exclusion of the way we used to play it. It's a pretty safe, peaceful middle game. So maybe not. I wouldn't think, that's not my impression. Okay, so they're playing a ko here. So there is an issue with the ko. So for instance, there's the issue of at some point black cutting here. And so black would have moves like this or moves like this, for instance. And that cut there would be very annoying. So when black cuts here, white wants to capture the ko. And there's this question of, is this ko threat good enough? Does black have enough ko threats? And does black really want to do it before fixing the center? So there's also the question of whether black plays once here first and then does it or not. And so there's this threat here, which is a bit worrying for white also. I'd be a bit worried that black's going to do that at some point. So that's what's happening with white capturing the ko here, trying to exchange it for the connection on the second line. And black doesn't want to answer that. You can see black's given up on trying to kill that white group on the left. It wasn't a very likely thing to happen anyway. Okay, so at this point, it's not a direct ko. Like they would like to win the ko, but it hasn't really started yet. This ko starts when black cuts on the fourth line. So they don't really, they don't have to play the most forceful ko threats, and they're going to be choosing their ko threats carefully. So like white might play a ko threat, white might play a move that you're not sure whether it's a ko threat or not. Okay, a quick look at territory. Black has close to 10 points in the lower left corner, and close to 30 points in the upper left corner. Black has less than 10 points in the top right corner. So just very, a loose calculation would give black 30, 40, 50 points, somewhere in the vicinity of 50 points. I think at this stage of the game, it's okay to be that. You don't have to be completely exact. So white will have some territory on the top side. Let's call that maybe about 10 points. White has a corner in the lower right corner, which is over 20 points. White has several points on the left side. That's close to 10 points. So that's 20, 30, 40, something on the bottom side. So I'd say it's going to be fairly close. Fairly close by human standards. And so I'm, yeah. People who are using computers here can give me the winning percentage for black or white. At this point, even though these players are world champion class players, they probably don't, it's not like they're saying to themselves, it's not like they're saying that, oh, I'm half a point behind, so what am I going to do about it? They haven't calculated it to that extent. But if you put it through a computer program, you're going to get that kind of numbers, 1.5 points, 2.5 points difference at this stage. So black extended. Yeah, they're fighting the ko. And so white would like to find a ko threat, but otherwise white might be playing some kind of defensive move on the top side. The Hana at N15. 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 Yes, the Hana at N15. David Peter is asking, does the Hana at N15 work for white? Okay. PhD Tony is telling us that the AI suggests that white's ahead by 2 points. Right. Yeah. It's not over yet as far as humans are concerned. So yeah, that sounds about right. I'm not surprised by that AI suggestion that white's ahead. Okay, so locally this move, of course it works. So it's not really a question of whether it works and that white will be able to capture some territory here. It's whether it's the best way to do. So there's the fact of the issue of this ko, where now this is going to be, definitely it's going to be a ko threat. So yeah. So there is the problem with this being fairly troublesome. Actually, this might even be stronger. Right. So white probably doesn't want to get into this fight, and so the ko here is pretty important. So what did white do? Okay, white played an Atari there, and took back the ko. Yeah. So they really want to win this ko. If black plays something like this would be a very big move. It would be very big. So yeah, white would be happy to capture this stump. So black really needs to find something that looks like a ko threat. Okay. Okay. Yeah, white finished the ko. I was going to say, yeah. That was not going to be forcing. All right. So this was a relatively peaceful way for black to play 2 moves on the bottom side. It is still a fairly big move. But that corner territory that black had, it's more like 6 points now. So there's a big difference in the size of black's corner territory. And there's a forcing move here for white. So you could say that that's weakening black's position on the outside. And white's position on the top side it's very much settled now. So that's actually, it's more than 15 points, maybe close to 20 points. White does have a lot of territory. So like, let's see. So like PhD Tony was telling us that the AI likes white. I sort of agree with that. Although I definitely do not have a number of points for you. R16. Extending at R16 would not be a ko threat. No, I don't think so. Okay, so that was Rick Rubenstein asking about a ko threat. Black really wanted to have a ko threat in this position. So when white captured this, black doesn't really have any easy to play ko threats. Probably doesn't want to make the choice of one of these cuts. I think this cut would be forcing, but like this would be, when black dies on the side, it's going to be a move inside white's territory. This might be better, but it also does, when black plays something like he did in the game, this is a bad exchange. So he doesn't really want to play that locally. So that's why he didn't. And Rick was asking about this move. It doesn't look like it's forcing to me. So like if black cuts on this side, black does get a forcing move here, but that's just about it. Or if black plays on this side, like this would not amount to much. And yes, so in this case, even if white plays here, black's not going to win the race to capture. White has 4 liberties and black has only 3. So this is actually not getting as much out of it as he did in game. So black played here and slided. So locally, I guess, apart from capturing the 1 white stone, which white probably would have answered that ko threat, apart from that, this is probably the best black can... Like, unless he had played some kind of... An attachment might have been a knight. So in this case, it might have been a slightly better two moves if white had played here and black maybe to this side. This might have been slightly better. Yeah, actually, I'm not sure where black's going to play here. Yeah, so it's a pretty good two moves, I suppose. Okay, so white answered that. Black's group is sort of one move away from having a living shape. So if black plays here and here, that's going to be alive on the side. And also black still does have some potential to escape out in the center. So otherwise black could be trying to link it to the center. So this, to take a quick look at the territory again, black has something close to 30 points in the upper left, and a little bit of territory maybe attached to it in the center, although there are a number of ways white can reduce that. So 30 points, less than 10 points in the lower left corner, and then just a few points in the top right corner, and a few points here. So those would add up to 20 points maybe. A lot of very, they're not really that convincing territories, but I think 20 points is a bit too much, actually. So white has about 20 points in the lower right, and the upper side, it's not really defined yet, but it's close to 20 points, and close to 10 points on the left, so it's 50 points already. 30, 40, 50, yeah. Yeah, so a slight advantage for white. I would be feeling good at this point with white, and I don't know. I wouldn't have an exact calculation, but I would be feeling it was moving along well. And yes, so the game is getting back to the time control. The game was 1 hour apiece, so they're getting actually fairly close to overtime. So the overtime is 1 minute. And only one time. So they don't have multiple overtimes. They only have the one segment of 1 minute. So it's going to move relatively quickly. Like, was it LG Cup that I did, which was 3 hours apiece? And so that took the whole day. But this is just going to be a few hours. So it started, for me, it started at 2 o'clock. So that was an hour and a half ago. Probably going to finish in another hour or two. Yeah, so an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours. Yes, it's sort of like the end game is starting already, but with this much space in the center, it's very difficult to play correctly. I think the way that all these groups are just completely alive, it makes it unusual compared to most games. So like August Leo, excuse me, was talking about how it's so different from games several years ago. And he was mentioning a game between Takemiya and Goto. I think that was an NHK game, a TV tournament from 7 years ago. So that's, well, yeah, Takemiya has his own style. So it's what they call the cosmic style. Right, so Lino Walker is asking, if black doesn't make a living shape on the right, can he use that move to cause some trouble in the center? So the trouble with causing trouble in center is that the space there is very limited, and black doesn't have any white stones to attack, really. So a move that would be sort of an area, let's see, I should stop. Let's see, they played a move? Yes. Okay, so black did live on the side. If black plays something like This would be an area that I would think of playing because black is threatening to pull this stone out. So this is a move that could be played at some point. White's probably going to answer it with something like that. So it's either that. I sort of doubt that this would work, although black would like to be able to do something like that. It doesn't seem to work. So somewhere around here or here, sort of eyeing that black stone that is potentially going to be able to escape out would be an idea. But even if black starts to make the center, it's just such a limited space. And actually, even if black doesn't add moves like this, black's going to have a few points in the center, just because black has all this strong position here. Even if black just leaves it as it is, there will be a few points that black's going to expect to get in the center. In most cases, sort of depends on, or otherwise white's going to have to use a lot of stones to take that away. And so playing moves like this and getting some territory in the center is actually, it's not as big as it might seem. Although black gets something like 15 points here, it's costing black tempos, and white's getting a bit of territory back. So white's getting something back here, and it's going to end up getting some territory of his own. So the center in games like this, it's not as important as it might look. So black, yeah, I think I agree with black making a life here. This move on the second line where black goes down here, it's a big move as far as territory is concerned. It's making a big difference to white's territory in the corner, which is now slightly less than 20 points. So these territories that I talk about, one of the reasons that I can be sort of vague about exactly how much territory there is that the territory, every time one or the other player plays a local move, that territory is going to change. So there's not really that much point in giving an exact number because it's changing all the time. And so actually, when you're actually playing a game, my advice for players is that you don't really want to spend you probably have a time control in your own games if you're playing on the internet, for instance. You don't want to spend that time calculating the score because it's just too slippery. And it's not going to improve your judgment. So like quite often you have better judgment if you just trust your instinct. And like if you think that you've been playing well, you should probably just assume that you have a good game going there, and you should play, maybe you want to play the simple move, or if you think you messed up somewhere, you should maybe play a bit more aggressively. And actually that way you're less likely to do something unreasonable at the wrong time. So yeah, actually calculating very in detail can actually be bad for your positional judgment and your experience, especially if you're an experienced player. If you've been playing for a while, your experience is going to give you a better result. Okay, so they're starting to play in the center basically because there's nothing left. So there's this wide open area on the right side, which if anything, it's going to be white's territory. So the reason it's going to be white's territory is that it's not going to be black's territory, because white has this forcing move here, where black has to answer it with something like this, maybe. And so what I'm saying here, let's just take the game forward a few moves. So what I'm saying here is that if black tries to surround it, it would be a fairly big move, but it would not make it into a black territory. White still has some territory in this area. So it's more of a white territory than black. If white at some point plays here, you can expect a few points for white. But in any case, although it seems to be a fairly large area, it's actually not very big as far as territory is concerned. So it's just a few points. And so all of the important moves on the second line are being played. A move like this is relatively big. So this is maybe a move that could be played fairly early in this end game. But it's about time for them to start playing towards the center. So that's what's happening here. Black peeped and escaped. So black is reducing white's territory there. and is looking at the cut at e17 in some cases. That's not a ladder anymore, and is looking at the potential to cut off this white stone in the center. So if white plays away, then black can play here or here, and has potential to cut off that white stone. So it's a multi-purpose move here. Right. So in the chat at YouTube, we're still talking about the comparison with games before we had AIs. And I think one of the things here is that you're comparing it with a game played by Takemiya, who tends to play a relatively simple looking game. So he doesn't get into the big fights that these players get into. And so part of it is Takemiya's style, which is pretty special, if you ask me. Yes, there is a difference between the games we used to play and the games we play now with the influence of the AIs. So there is that, but in the case of Takemiya's games, it's more that he has a pretty distinctive style, I'd say. Okay. Ed Hillon was asking about the tournament where you buy time. So that would be the Nongshim Cup? Yes, yes. And there was the Ing rules. Apparently they're not using the Ing rules anymore in the tournaments in Taiwan. They have their own professional system, but apparently they're not using the Ing rules anymore. There was a period where he was such a big sponsor of Go that there were a lot of tournaments using his rules. Apparently they're not doing that anymore. I heard that just the day before by one of the people who came from there. So I suppose it's true. But it was that tournament where you did not have any overtime, as to say, and you had to buy it by points. Okay, BuzzJuice is asking, are there any players who still play remarkably simply? And it looks more and more complicated every year. I'd say with computers, the way they play the josekis, the corner sequences, is relatively simple, actually. Like, there aren't so many complicated joseki that computers like to play. The only one would be maybe the Flying Daggers variation of the 3-3 invasion, would be an example. And some of those attachments they play against corner enclosers, shimaris, can get a bit complicated. But like they generally, like if white plays a Kakari, it's like happened in this game. Quite often you see, if white plays here, you see black answer like this. And then, for instance, just to jump back to an opening position, if white plays here, quite often you see black play here. So it's like two relatively simple josekis, and if you're playing someone who plays the AI style, you can usually get along with just knowing those two. So it's this one and this one. So the way they start the corners like this is actually, in many cases, it's relatively simple. The problem is that when you start with relatively simple corners like this, the following fight, there's a lot of room for people to get into fights, and the following fight can become very, very complicated. And so the modern games, if you wish to call them that, tend to be much more complicated in the middle game. Okay, that's a great question by W. Zhang. Actually, I do have an opinion here. So I'll talk about that now. So let's just catch up with the game. Yeah, so the question here is how white is going to reinforce that stone in the center. And at one point, if ever, is white going to be able to attack here. So this is the weak point in black shape, which might be something that white can attack at some point. So white might be aiming at this push through and cut, or otherwise white would be thinking of a way to connect this stone up. So it's a pretty volatile position here in the center, and this is a kind of a crucial point in the game where white has to figure out a winning strategy. Making use of the potential here. Looks like maybe it's not going to work immediately. So white has to maybe set it up with some stone in the center would change that. Well, obviously. So how is white going to set that up in a way that doesn't get massacred first? So white doesn't really want to back out of this fight with a move like this, but would rather be moving towards black's potential area there in the center. And so it's being peaceful. But white would like to, every point counts at this stage of the game. So white does want to reduce that center just a little bit while white saves this. So it's, he's probably going to use up the rest of it. In fact, he's running out of time. Looks like Park is running out of time, and KJ seems to have 20 minutes. But I was liking that question. Let's see if I can still find it. W. Zhang was asking, in the Shusaku's days, so he's talking about a few hundred years ago, I guess maybe about almost 200 years ago. People didn't peak in Go skills until much later in life. So people would be, they didn't live as long, but they were still peaking like in their 30s, maybe 40s. And Joa became Meijin at 41. That was after he peaked though. Why are people peaking much earlier nowadays? In the mid-late 20s. So this is something that had been going on for a while, like even the Kitani school, which was prominent in Japan in the 20th century, the last half of the 20th century. Many of the top Japanese players were from the Kitani school. I think they peaked. They were the players who started to peak in their 20s. And also Rin Kaiho, he was a young challenger to Sakata Io. And I think Sakata Io was somewhere close to 60 maybe, and Rin Kaiho was very young. I think he was, compared for that era, he was very young. He might have been close to 30 though. And then gradually they get younger. So I think part of it, the reason that trend, I think part of the trend could have been that it's much more physically demanding. In the way the tournaments are set up, they're not so slow paced. Like in the old days, people would play, would adjourn the game and they would come back to it a different day. So they would be able to rest in between moves, spend a lot of time on the game. And physical stamina was not such a big issue. And so they could just go on until they died, basically. There was no point where a player would be losing because of a stamina, physical difference. Where nowadays people play the games in one day, and late in the day there is an issue with stamina. So people get tired and make mistakes, and that's not so true of the younger players. So I'd say in the late 20th century and into this century, that was the first issue. And then after that, now that we have AIs, people don't need, like when I studied Go obviously before we had AIs, I think it took decades to get a decent understanding of the opening, basically. Having opening ideas that I wanted to play. It took me a long time, and I think it took almost all players decades, basically, to build enough knowledge of the opening and the game itself to have real opinions. So it took a long time for people to develop their game that way. And the young players now, they get a kickstart with the computers. They get the value of the computer programs is that they can give you a value to positions where we used to not really know which side was ahead. So like people would have opinions about who is ahead, and we wouldn't be sure whether or not we were right about that. And so that's the big difference. So nowadays we can show it to the computer's going to give you an answer. And that's a kickstart for younger players who don't have that accumulated knowledge yet, and they're getting the answer. So they're starting with that. They are very quick to develop winning strategies in the opening, and so they don't lose to the older players. Were always winning in the openings basically, and would have a significant advantage before the middle game, and that's how the prominent players would be still winning in their middle age. So yeah, that's something where I sort of had an opinion there, why I wanted to answer that question in detail a bit. So thanks for asking that. It gave me a talking point. And August Leo is asking my preferred opening. I don't have one anymore. It keeps changing. Okay, so the attachment here, some players would say it's not really all that meaningful, but the point here when white attaches at the 2-2 point, there's two ways that black can potentially answer this. So if black plays here, this is relatively good for how to live. So it makes a difference when at some point white plays this stone at 2 and attacks black. This tends to be taking the 2-1 points like this, black 1 and black 5. These points are vital points in the corner. So taking these 2 points is a relatively good way for black to make 2 eyes. And so if white plays here, black can play here. And it's still the same thing where this is actually better for black. Black has an eye on the other side. So the other way for black to answer would be this one. And now it's a bit more awkward for black. So let's see. So if white plays here, So if white plays here, and here, this is dead actually. And if white plays here, this is also dead because when black tries to take it, white's going to make a 5 stone. And if black doesn't fill one of those points, it's an eye against no eye. So eventually white can fill the outside liberties, and it's going to be an eye against no eye, and white's going to win the race to capture. Or if black fills the liberty early on, white can just make it a 5 stone shape. So this is actually dead. And so the attachment here has to do with the komi at 2. That's how it's working. And also black answered that way. So the problem with answering on the other way, although this would be alive even if white plays here, it gives white this forcing move. So that's what white was trying to get in advance. So in the game, white played here and then this became forcing. If white had started from this side, then black would later have answered here and it would have been alive. So that's how that attachment on the second line was working for white. Okay, so white did go after that weak point in black's position. So white's going to cut that black group off, and we're going to see a fight here. So I'm not sure how this is. Obviously, black cannot allow white to capture these stones. So for instance, one might expect something like this. This kind of a fight. So it looks like black has at least 5 liberties. And if black at some point gets to play this point and exchange it for something, that's 7 liberties. So it's 6 or 7 liberties, I'd say, black has. And when white pushes out like this, white can extend the liberties, but white is going to be getting in trouble on this side if white leaves it too long. So at some point, white has to come back here. And let's see, if we look at it like this, this would be 6 liberties. But in actual play, let's see, white has 5 liberties here. In actual play, if white plays here, it's going to be shorter than that. So let's see. This would be... Yeah, so this is going to be a win for white. So this is also, it's only 3 liberties left. So yeah, if white gets to play this point, then black becomes shorter. And also it looks like white could probably extend his liberties in the center here to something more like 6. I'm not sure about that. Might be this one. Yeah, it looks like white has some potential to extend the liberties here. Yeah. So maybe it's a tough race to capture for black. But black has plenty of time. He has, on the clock that I'm looking at here, he has more than 16 minutes. So he's gonna spend his time thinking about that, I'm sure. Okay, so now we can look at this variation. This is also a variation that we could think about. And if white tries the same thing, now black's going to capture it. It's going to be a ko. So the ko might be okay for black. But white's probably just going to capture it like this. And that's pretty big. So that's the idea with white's move. Okay, back to questions maybe? Yes. Okay, Ed Helon was talking about the Chinese opening. The AI is in generally not liking the Chinese opening very much. But recently you do see people playing sort of variants of the Chinese opening. So maybe it's making them come back. Is black e17 even worth mentioning? Black e17... Cutting there, yeah, maybe it depends. For instance, like sometimes black can immediately play at f18, so that might be more. It depends. Like if we get some kind of free cardie where that becomes a white territory, sometimes black can play here. And if white cannot immediately capture these 2 stones, this is going to be a problem for white. So, like in this particular position, white cannot chase and capture these stones. It's not a ladder. It means that whatever white does, even if white plays that Atari, capturing here and the snapback here, they become miai. So if black clamps here, locally white would have to answer it here. So that would be really big. It would have the follow-up here. Follow-up of, for instance, moves like this. And then if white does this, there's this. So you can see that white territory is reducing a lot. White might even answer it here, in which case black has to connect them. So if white wants to take sente, this might be the way white plays it. For the time being, this is really big, so white might just play here, and that's really big. So yeah, there is some endgame there. Okay, white's playing a relatively peaceful move here. So white didn't, well, or you might say white did not go for the trade. So I'm not really sure if I was correct in calling it peaceful. But like if white had played here, then I would have expected this trade. And you know, if black is going to get this one in or not is really an issue. I think it's not going to be forcing though. After black plays this, it doesn't work anymore. So in this case, when this doesn't work, then cutting here, this is a thing, because when black plays here, and black gets a little extra endgame here. So that would be an endgame tesuji. Or if white captures from above, black can sometimes get something extra. So that is an endgame tesuji. Sometimes it's going to be meaningful. But instead, white pushed through here. So if black then pushes through and counterattacks, we get back to that semi-eye where I was saying white's going to win. So it's this semi-eye where white can push a few times and then move back here. So white's going to win this one because wedging at h16, although white can probably extend liberties a little bit, wedging here is going to reduce black's liberties to the extent that it's an easy win for white. So white pushes through and is just going to reduce this black's territory like this. So the game, yes. So white does need one more stone there to connect up. White has a number of choices. So white could play here, white could play here, or white could play here. Pros and cons to all of those moves. I'd probably take this one. That's right. They have this stream advertised there. They let me do that. So that was Raven Toe talking about OGS. There's a little banner that says Michael Redmond is live. Okay, I didn't see that move. So this is another way for white to connect up, because if black plays here, it's a double Atari. So that was cute. That was a good move. I like that one. Point is that if black connects here, that was a good exchange. So white's going to play here. Or if black connects here, and now white has all sorts of forcing moves. So at the very least, white has this forcing move, which is going to give white an extra stone towards the center. So that would be profitable just in itself. Yeah. So that was worth seeing. Just seeing one of these tesuji moves makes it worthwhile watching these games. Okay, so much for the black potential territory in the center. It looks like most of it's gone now. Okay, so people are talking about the OGS banner that they saw and came here. Don't forget to sign up to my channel so you can find me again, because I do do live streams. I put out videos on my channel, so there's a lot of videos for you to watch. And yes, I do play on OGS. Usually when I'm on OGS, I'm playing against my Patreon supporters. And so those are people who support me at Patreon. I guess I should post the link just to push my Patreon site. So if you go here and you look at it, there is a tier where one of the presents that you get for donating to my channel is a monthly game on OGS. So that's sort of my favorite site. I'm not using it today, but it's really great for game commentaries too. The one weakness is they don't have the professional games broadcast so much. So someone would have to copy the moves onto their site. So maybe that would be one of the few weaknesses. Great, thank you, Brandon. Clicking on the bell is something it's supposed to be good for me also. Okay, so by pushing through there on the left, black did get something extra as far as territory is concerned. So if black had not, then if black had pushed from the other side, then really all that territory would have been gone. So by pushing through here, he did get some of the territory. So now this white stone at I-8-13, white doesn't even have to save it now. So it's a lot easier for white. Okay, I'll just go back a few moves because I probably didn't talk about... White actually did protect once, didn't he? He protected here, and black jumped here. So white has protected once before he played that attack in the center. Yeah, so it wasn't if he attacked immediately. Okay, so yeah, so white's setting up the push through on the left there. Yeah. Again, sort of chasing that black group and taking away as much territory from black as he can. So black does have something close to 30 points there. Black will have more than 30 points if he adds a stone on the left. If not, it's going to be maybe a bit less than 30 points. I'm talking about black's territory in the upper left. So yeah, black is close to 50 points, I guess. 38, 44, 5, 50, yeah, about 50 points. Yes, and he had that stone. So let's see. I do think white is ahead. So yeah, when black cuts there, black is threatening on the left there, so white has to answer on the left. If white fills a liberty, then white's going to be okay. So I'm talking about the potential of black playing this kind of stuff. Provided white has filled a liberty there, it's not going to be a big problem for white. Okay, on Twitch we have people comparing the Go scene in Korea, China, and Japan. I'd say yes. The Chinese, they do have a big population, and Go is fairly popular, and so it's that would be a good reason for them to have a lot of strong players. It's also a very popular profession. So like I think they have a good selection of potential Go players, and also it's very competitive, just because of the fact that they're, even before they become pro, the potential professionals are very strong too. So they have a very strong field, very competitive on the way to professional. Makes it not easy to become a professional, and when they do make it, they're already very strong. So there was a period where you would see a young player, a new professional, and he would already be world champion, fighting in the final stages of these tournaments. So that's what it's like in China. Korea has a long history, although they have a smaller country, obviously, and a smaller population. They do have a long history of being avid Go players. So probably as far as the percentage of people who play Go, I would, my guess is that the largest percentage is in Korea. So I think that's one of the things. Also, their Go players are very well known. They're pretty popular. Sort of like athletes, like people know the name of Lee Sedol and stuff like that. I still remember the time I went to do the commentary for the Lee Sedol versus AlphaGo game. We were in Seoul, and everyone knew that there was this game going on. So like there was a lot of interest in people off the street, which is pretty unheard of in Japan. So I'd say that as far as general popularity is concerned, that's where Japan is behind, and it's becoming less attractive as a professional when we compare it with countries like Korea and China. So I'd say that's how that's my one of the reasons I think. There's also the issues with how they study. Koreans had a more modern way of studying the game, which gave them an advantage over Japanese players at a certain point. But that was before we had computers, so it was more relevant before we had computers, and maybe a bit less relevant now. So it looks like black is going for a bit of a squeeze here. Okay, PhD Tony says that the AI thinks that white is ahead by 2 points, but also thinks both sides are not playing optimally. So it's like it's cut. It doesn't like the moves they're playing, and probably the score is just going back and forth a fraction of a point every time. So the computer does that, and sometimes it's hard to know if it's even right or not to that extent. These point estimates that it's giving us, they're basic. I think my understanding is that they're just the average of all the results that the computer is getting. So not necessarily an accurate. Well, it's actually pretty accurate, but it's not always as accurate as the human calculation at this point. Because actually, when it gets to the end game, some players are very accurate in their calculation of. You have to read out the correct moves. So the computer doesn't necessarily limit itself to the correct moves. It reads out all sorts of variations. Okay, so we can see the squeeze coming up here. If white continues to extend, then this is a double Atari. So black can squeeze like this. Probably doesn't make any difference that throw-in, but black can capture these stones. Or even playing on this side is probably big. That's big. Maybe here. So this is the squeeze that black is looking at. Oh, okay, yeah. I thought I would just take the 2 stones, actually. Mm-hmm. August Leo, I agree with that. It's interesting. August Leo says it's interesting to see Go evolve, and ultimately don't think the game can ever have an end because it won't be solved, and I love it for that. So, with the system that Google created with AlphaGo, basically, it doesn't seem to be trying to solve the game. So that's I agree that way. AIs are developed so much that I wouldn't be surprised that if sometime they might have something that tries to, like computers themselves are getting so advanced. There is that potential. But just the fact that there's so many variations in a single game makes it literally it's an astronomical number of variations. So reading all that out would be similar to sort of solving the universe or something like that, as far as I understand. Okay, so white's sort of walking into the squeeze here, and I sort of wonder if there's some way that white can... No, I don't think so. Like it could link up to white's capturing black stones in the center here, but at this point the top side is probably more important. So white's pushed through this far, he's probably going to push through all the way. And capture. And in this case, white would be able to do stuff like this. This might be a bit troublesome for black, this kind of thing. So maybe black doesn't want to capture at 8. Looks a bit dangerous. Borderline. Borderline, but maybe dangerous. But so black might just connect one of these places. Mm-hmm. Right, right. What Tetsi 1982 is saying here, something I've heard before, like there's this huge number of possible positions in the game, and it's more than the number of particles in the known universe, number of, yes. So I've heard something like that before. So it's a problem. So usually being squeezed like this would be just terrible for white. And the reason that it's relatively a small loss is probably because in the end game it doesn't matter as much. So like there's no fighting left to be played, and they're going to finish the end game. It's not such a issue as it would have been otherwise. So even though white has like something like 4 or 5 eyes, yeah, you just have to squeeze like that. Because white's going to connect anyway. It's just like it didn't really make any difference. And black could have done it this way. Black didn't really need to throw in there. And could have played here. But it's more fun to squeeze. So I understand that. Hello, Arthur. The computer apparently says that white is winning, but it's getting pretty close. So it's going to be, maybe it's going to be a very close game here. And of course, okay. So this is a very tricky move. So for the time being, black is trying to make some territory in the center, but it's also very dangerous. So for instance, if white cuts here and black answers like this, then black is already in trouble. So there's a number of ways white can do this. But the stones on the side here, they're going to die. So black cannot actually answer that cut and would be playing something like this and would still be trying to escape out. So in this case, white's going to try to kill something. So maybe this group on the right or the group in the center, and it's going to be a wild fight. Otherwise, like if white plays here and pushes, what is black going to do? So this looks really dangerous for black. Yeah, so I don't really get that move. It looks like you can't answer the Tari. So white could even start with the push and cut. Black has to escape in this direction. And so what was that move? I don't think it really succeeded for black. So a bit puzzling. I started with the Atari. So at this point, black has to escape. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I missed some of the comments in the YouTube chat. Looks like they're talking about big boards that might be more challenging to computers. But yeah, I don't know very much about that. We did used to put 4 boards together to make a 38 by 38 board. And I remember at the American Go Congress, and was it South Carolina? There was this person who made Go boards, and he made one of the shape of South Carolina, so of the state. And so it was really fun playing on it, but we had to make new rules because of all of the zigzags on the edge of the board. There were points where we didn't really know whether there were points you could play on or not, or how many liberties they had. There was a lot of weird stuff happening on the edges of that state. It wasn't one of those square rectangular states that we sometimes have in America. Okay, so white could not answer the Atari here. It means that the move that black played here, I don't see how this move was working, because usually you play a move like that and your opponent plays an Atari, you have to be able to escape with the stone. But black could not. So I don't know why white allowed black to cut there. I would have connected, but in either case, I think this was a success for white. Okay, so that's cooled off the center. Yeah, so what I was saying here is that I would have connected. And still black cannot play here because white's going to capture it with this. So black has to do something like this. Maybe this way. This looks better for white. Black does need to add a stone here to the center. So it's going to be something like that. But instead he allowed black to cut here. He was just so happy he could capture those stones. Okay, PhD Tony is telling us that the AI thinks the game is dead even. A J5 cut. J15 cut. Yes, well, it's gone now. Okay, so it's still very close. And let's see, so the rest of the game is pretty soon now. The end game on the right side is going to get big. Black actually got some territory in the center out of this, so it doesn't look like it was so bad for black after all. Yeah, I think white messed up by allowing black to cut here at, let's see, at this point. So that's J13. So this move is not, when black covers, okay. If black covers now, if white connects now, it's not going to be forcing. So locally, white can play here, and black's going to have to answer like this. Because if black answers here, this is a dead shape. So white's probably just setting up this forcing move, which reduces the black corner to something like 6 points. Okay, so the right side and the center and the top side. So there's only about 3 significantly large points left. So let's just make a... So black's going to answer in the corner here. This is a big move. This is actually fairly big. Establishing the squeeze and getting some territory for white. So that's a fairly big move. Somewhere around here, this is a big move that's going to start to make some territory on the right side. This is probably biggest. And then there's some stuff on the lower side. This is a fairly big move, which does have some effect on black's eye space here. So there's a threat combined with stuff like this, for instance. There is a threat that black's not 100% alive. So black's not quite alive on the side here. Maybe not going to die, but there's some potential squeezing that white could be doing here in connection to the center. So like, actually, in this case, yeah, well, 16 won't be, black won't answer 16 at 17, but an example of how it could go wrong for black. So yeah, he doesn't have any reason to think here. He's probably just using the 1 minute to figure out something else at some other point of the game. So like locally, black's probably just going to answer here. He doesn't really have any good moves on like this. This is probably too early to try something like this. This would be a bit dangerous. It would be a ko if white plays here. Uh-huh. That's intriguing. Yeah, this 505 is saying, I doubt if there will ever be motivation to brute force Go, as long as AI is completely dominant. And that's probably true. Like there is the value of doing something that's brand new that AlphaGo did, which made the news and made it more famous, and the whole system that Google was creating. So there is that thing. And then the same goes other difficult computing problems, yes. And so if anything, I reckon computing itself to evolve beyond just calculating whatever that is. Yeah, that is intriguing. I'm pretty sure the next step could easily be something that would be hard for us to understand what was going on even. Okay, so despite the fact that I said that there's no point in black trying anything like this, he did. So what's happening with this is black's group in the corner is not alive yet, but white has to be careful here. So what's going to happen if white kills the corner? Locally it's dead. So let's make a diagram while he's in overtime, so I won't have much time. But if white plays here, this is a dead shape. Let's try this one first. This one, it doesn't look like it works for black. So the corner is going to be dead. This is the problem. If white pulls back, black can play here. And this is going to be bad for white. So like if black plays here and here and here, this group on the side is in trouble. So this is going to be bad for white. So white has to chase like this. If black escapes, then now white's okay. I think this is a win for white. It could turn into a semi with this white group on the side against the corner. I think black's going to lose that one. So it's going to be a ko. So this would be a ko, where if white connects, black can push through here. and it's a ko to connect. It's also bad for the white stones on the right, so this is I guess is a pretty good ko for black. The ko that white would choose would be this one. So it's a ko for the life or death of black's group. And he chose to go this way. I suppose it's because maybe white doesn't have a good ko threat. That must be, the reason must be that. So white doesn't have a good ko threat at this point. And the ko does pose a big problem for the white group when black wins it. Also, black has some ko threats in the corner. So I guess that's the idea. And white just answered. So in this case, there's no problem. Now we're talking about 9x9 boards. 9x9 is very tactical. So yes, generally people do start close to the center. And I'm not sure what the discussion was about there, so I'll just leave that. There's a lot of calculation in 9x9, and a lot of the variations are just going to be a half point difference. So it's actually pretty challenging in itself. Okay, we're 2.5 hours into the game, and I think they're both in overtime. The clock here seems to indicate that maybe KJ has some time left. 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. People are saying that their computers say that black's winning by half a point now. So this area in the center of the board is still very much undefined. The right side and the top side. And P18 is whether white can play that as a sente move or not is one of the issues here. Okay, so one of the things with this cut, I think it's sort of setting up that forcing move. So like in a position like this, yeah, I think this is, if white can play here, I think it's just dead. And yeah, it's dead or it's going to be bad in either case. So yeah, this is probably bad for black. Like maybe he can save some of it by playing like this, but he probably has to do that before he can save the 2 stones. So it would be just losing the 2 stones would be bad too. So I think that force in some cases, like in a case like this, it's going to be forcing. Okay, at this point, okay, Testy 1982 is asking, can I count the score at this point? So I'd say this is sort of borderline. So in a real game situation with, say, about an hour of time, it would probably be too difficult still. But it's to the point where, like, I'd say there's, I used to give myself problems to calculate the end game. And they would be, well, the easy ones were the final 30 moves. So 30 moves is easy. And the only challenge there is to be able to calculate the score correctly. So just having a position with the final 30 moves to go to the end of the game. And I would be looking at it without putting it on the board and trying to visualize how it turns out. And that would be relatively easy. It's usually just very small endgame moves. And then there would be the 50 move problems, which were more challenging and just about right for me. And this looks like it's probably more like 70 moves, which would be very challenging. But there are some players who can actually read it out if they have enough time. Of course, with this time control, they won't be doing that. They don't know. I think with a half-point difference, they really don't know. And but they do have a gut feeling. Like the board is defined enough, and there are enough defined territories that the players they have already counted the territories that are pretty much established. So like this territory that black has in the upper left, or the territory that black has in the upper right, or of course, obviously this corner in the lower left. Territories like that, they've already calculated them because they already know that it's probably better for white to be playing from this side, and then black's going to play like this. So they know how big this territory is. So stuff like that. So they can calculate the local territories, and then there are territories like this white territory in the lower right, which is going to be, it's going to be defined if white plays here to a certain degree. Like the right side, there's still some undefined points there. But it's going to be fairly defined if white plays here. But then if black plays that point, then you don't know who's going to play next there. So it's a bit more complicated. So there's a kind of they will have a rough estimate of this territory. And they've done all of that earlier in the game. So they just remember the sizes of these territories and have a general idea of how much white has to make on the right side, how much black has to make in the center to have a winning percentage, a winning position. So they have a fairly good idea of what they have to do with the open areas. But you see in this position, there's the center, there's the right side, and this move on the top here. For instance, if white plays this here, black would play this point also. So black would be playing this point also. Black might even start with this. So this is a really big move, and it's just about equal to any moves white might be playing on the right side or even the lower right corners. It's not a big difference. So there's a lot of areas that are going to be changing in size fairly significantly. It makes it very difficult to make the calculation. So you actually have to have an accurate blueprint of what's going to happen in the endgame. You have to have an accurate, you have to read it out, calculate the moves accurately to a certain degree when you have a lot of moves that are pretty close to each other in size. And that's what makes it difficult. So I'd say at this point I would not be able to calculate the score. Okay, John Smith is asking, well, sort of talking about the idea of how early in this game I was calling it the end game. So I think maybe he's sort of joking a bit when he says that it's interesting how pros play the first third of the game and then call the remaining 2/3 of the game end game. And in this game, it's very true because basically when we call it the end game, at least when I call it the end game, put it that way. When I call it the end game, what I mean is that there's no fighting that they're planning on doing anymore. So like there's always the possibility that the players will get into a dangerous position afterwards. So like we do have life and death here in the lower left corner and potentially on the bottom side here. And also, for instance, if white... Let's see, I lost a few moves there. So white played the hanging connection here. Yeah, white played the hanging connection here. So if white had played a ko here, there is the potential that we would have had a ko here that could have affected the life or death of that black group. So things do happen. Fights do happen in endgame in some cases. But in the status quo, there's just a lot of living groups. So when you run out of groups that are in danger, groups that can be chased around the board, that's when I start calling it an endgame. So in this game, very early, I was calling it an endgame. So you can have an endgame that lasts something like 100 or more moves, depending on how many ko's you're playing as you play it. Like without ko's, it might be a bit difficult to get more than 100 moves of endgame. But you can have long endgames. And in a game like this, where you had an open center, so like when the center was like this, I was already starting to say it was the endgame was starting, just because we ran out of locally dead groups. Everything was alive at this point. So I think it's reasonable to call this an endgame. And it's only 100 moves into the game. So like we had close to 200 moves to finish the game at this point, maybe. Depending on how they finish. Okay, so let's see, getting back to the game. So white played the upper left corner move here. This is really big. And black played this move. White covered, yeah, so they're all taking big moves. This is big because it's threatening to cut white off. So white's group on the bottom side here, it has to connect up. So this black group, I think bad things will happen if white gets to play here. But for the time being, white can't really do that yet. Because white's group is not alive either. So if we just isolate the bottom side here and say this is a life and death problem, then it would be, white would be able to kill it. But it requires white's group to be stable here, so it's not going to work yet. Okay, so they're going to finish the bottom side. So the bottom side is important because both sides have to connect their groups up or make eyes or something. So there is some life and death involved here. And after that, it's just the right side and the center, and they're going to be finished. Like, there's not so much endgame left. Only the right side, there's some extra space there. So, like, it is going to be a number of moves. But as far as points is concerned, it's going to be relatively small. An interesting thing is, like, in the middle game or early in the game, you would see, for instance, white playing on the third line like this. When you get into the end game, sometimes you see white playing the second line. It's just the second line is easier to make territory there. If you play on the third line, sometimes it's not so easy to make territory. So like, this would be bad for white. Maybe black would start with, yeah, it doesn't matter. So sometimes it's easier to make territory if you start on the second line. So if white wanted to connect up and make territory, this would be maybe, even with this, there's some issues. This would be a ko, actually. We could get into a ko. I like to show the ko variations. This would be a ko. One way or the other. Okay. So, I was talking about this move, which would be trying to kill the black group. The move that white played here is not really trying to kill the black group. It's sort of borderline. We do have to remember that white's not connected up yet. So, for instance, if black pushes through here, I wonder what white is going to try to do. So like this way of cutting it doesn't even really kill the black group, but there's a problem with black cutting here. So that's an issue. It's going to be bad for white. Okay, black played here. So it's still not gonna die. So let's see. Yeah. So the group on the side is sort of borderline, but it's really difficult for white to kill it. For instance, if white really wants to be poking against this M16 point, because without the potential to break that eye, for instance, white needs to be able to play a move like this so as to give black a shape that's not alive here. So white, in this diagram, white sort of wants to prepare to break black's eye by playing at 5 while cutting black off. So that's what I'm trying to do here with white 1. The problem is that when black plays here, if white plays like this, now it's a real eye. So whatever black does, it's going to be easy for black to live. But if white plays here, then black gets to connect up this way. So that's what the marked black stone is doing there. It's making it difficult for white to kill the black group. So yeah, in this case, white played here, and black gets to play here. So this exchange, this forcing move here, by making that shape, it's really good for black. So like, even if we assume black's not going to play that now. It's much easier for black to make the 2 eyes. So that now the marked stone is defending that eye at N17. So that's the whole point here. So this move, that's what black was setting up here. Yeah, and black got to capture the stone. So this worked out fairly well for black. Okay. And now black, after white connects at oh, so I didn't see that move coming. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that was surprising. Okay, so now black's alive. That was not successful for white, although white did get Sente here. Well, that finished the endgame there anyway. So, didn't seem to be very good for white, though. So now we just have the right side left. White's probably going to surround the right side, although white has set something up in the center. So, for instance, okay, I'll be right back. But for instance, just to show you something here, white can play here and squeeze. So black's not going to do it this way, but this would be really bad. So white can cut here and capture the 1 stone. So maybe the end game would be something like that. It's not a big deal, though. Okay, I'll be back in a few moments. I just have to pay a visit. Okay, I'm back. Okay, let's see. So it's still White's turn. Looks like they didn't play anything. Okay, I'm in my diagram though, yeah. So let's get back to the game. Yeah, so White did play that cut. Okay, this is a standard sequence in the corner there. So White's going to play that. And at some point, White's going to play here. And by doing that, White's setting up a kind of a squeeze. So later on, White's going to play here. And if White plays here next, it's actually a seki. So if Black plays here, White can capture these two stones. It's an even trade of 2 stones for 2 stones. Or if Black doesn't do that, it's a seki as it is. So that turns the whole area into 0 points. In Japanese or Korean rules anyway. Let's see. It's a Korean tournament, so I think it's going to be 0 points. So that's how it works. And so if Black answers that, then White gets to cover here, and Black has to put another stone in. So that was counting 2 points for each captured stone. That's 6 points in all. It's only 6 points. This is actually better for White than doing something like this and letting Black play the key point in the corner. That's the 2-1 point. The 1-2 point is a key point. This is 6 points, and White didn't get to play this move with Sente. So there was a move that White didn't get to play in Sente. And so it's actually slightly better for White to start with this move. So this is the Tetsuji in the corner there. Okay, White played the high move. Black will be able to scoop it out by peeping on the second line here. But it does make the move more forceful. So like if Black plays away, then White will be able to play another move. I guess it would be here. To get a third line territory. So it's more forceful. Black does have to answer this. I'd say that would be the biggest move, definitely. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, this is longer than you would expect from a 1-hour time limit. So let's see, they're almost 3 hours into the game. That's a big end game move. That was about 6 points, a difference of 6 points. But of course, the right side is pretty big too. It looks pretty close. Yeah, it looks so close. So is that Isaac? I never know how to pronounce that name. Sorry. Is asking how is the game balance? And it's really close. Like every time I count it, it's very close. So I know it's close, but I don't know who's winning. Okay, August Leo, good night. This video, it will be remaining as a video, so you look at the live section in my channel and you'll find the videos. So it'll remain there. So go ahead, you can go back and look at it later if you want. Okay, so that Tetsuji at the 1-2 point in the upper right corner, the S2 point, you might say, it's still a thing. It's still going to work to a certain degree. Maybe making a 1 point or yeah, something like a 1 point difference. Okay. Okay, Lino Walker says he thinks that Q7 just won the game. So it's this move. You know, it could be. This move here was actually pretty big. So I was thinking black was going to play here and erase the side like this. This seems to be slightly bigger. If white covers here, what black can push through here. This would be big. This would be good for black. Or this would be a collapse for white. So there's really no choice that white has here. And this would erase the side. This was 6 points. But I think this move, if we look at it this way, it seems to be a bit bigger. Yeah, it seems to be bigger. So it could be that this gave white an advantage. It's still going to be really close. So this white group here, it's actually alive as it sits. So it's white. You would think that white had to answer one of these cutting points with so many cutting points here, and also this one. You would think that white has to answer, but actually, let's just see. This is 4 points. Let's say white plays this one. If black cuts here, or if black cuts here, black can cut with sente. But this cut, it actually doesn't work because white can make 2 eyes. So this white group is alive. So white actually does have that. Oh, but he answered it. Okay. Maybe he thought that was a big move. Just as I was saying, he didn't have to do that. Okay. Lee Shoemasters started to question that why M7 was necessary. M7, black M7. M7, okay, that was Testy 1982 asking, was black M7 necessary? So that was, it wasn't necessary, but it was a move. So like, at some point white could take here and force black to play here. So this would be something like close to 1 point for white. When black takes as in the game, this is 3 points for the time being and 2 more points if black captures that. So it's 1 point or 6 points for black. It's 3.5 points if you average it. So this actually was a reverse sente, or actually it was a sente move for white. If later in the game it would have been a sente move for white, and it made a significant difference in the territory. So in itself, it wasn't as big as, for instance, a move like this or a move like this, but the fact that later on white's going to be able to play this move with sente made it relatively big. So like a forcing move is more efficient than a move that costs 1 tempo. So that's the difference there. So it was not, so to say, necessary, but it was arguably a fairly big move. Okay, so this is a big move. It's 3 points in the local, and then there's the wedge at Q8, which is probably going to be forcing 3 more points. So actually, it's pretty important for white a big move for white to answer this, actually. So there was someone asking about white, what might happen if white connected at J13. Yeah. So that was, let's see, let's take a look at that. It's just in game now, so we can take a look at that position. So yeah, it was this move. Surely white should have connected. And black would have to, like, black cannot do this because it's going to die. And so black would have been playing something like this. And if white plays here, black plays here. So this would be... I think white might even play here. This is still an option. Like this. Oh. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, maybe not so good. So yeah, so black's going to play here and cover here. But I think this does, just because of all the bad aji in the center, it looks better for white this way. So yeah, black will have some issues in the center later on. So this is the diagram that I was expecting, and I think it was probably pretty big that white allowed black to cut here. This is when people started saying that the computers like black, and I think that this trade that they made in the center of the board was what caused that. Okay, so black connected there, white. This is also a big move. It was something like 4 points just locally. And also the fact that for the time being, it gave white an extra liberty. Okay, so this was 4 points. White cuts here, so that's about 3 points. I think the right side was bigger. Maybe they're going to be playing a ko on the right side. Maybe white intends to play that ko there. So the ko I'm talking about is on the J15 exploit. Yeah, J15, black can gain a little bit on J15. It's not... So, okay, that was, let's see, W Zhang, yes. Black can play at J15. So, for instance, if black plays here and then plays here... Oh, well, it's gone because white has connected... That wasn't a big deal, though, because white could have answered it here and connected it N14 anyway. So that was before white connected at N14. Black could have played there to force white, but it wasn't a big difference in territory, so it's not really worth talking about, I don't think. Okay, so they're playing the end game here, and they're the issue here in this end game is going to be it was going to be the ko on the right side. So the ko I'm talking about is when black plays here. If black just connects, it's a big move. It's worth a difference of 3 points, but black doesn't really want to spend a move doing that. So what black wants to do is black wants to play a ko here, and usually this is so dangerous for white that white's going to eventually answer. So like we say we give, but if we look at the overall position, black doesn't have so many ko threats. So like if black had some ko threats, black could force white to connect here, and then could win this ko, force white to connect all these points, and then black would not need to add a move to that. So it would be very efficient. The problem here is that black doesn't have ko threats to make that happen. And so for the time being, he was trying to erase some of white's ko threats by playing here, I guess. But white actually didn't answer that, and it's going to be this ko now. So this ko, it's a two-stage ko. It's actually pretty important because it's going to make a difference to the size of the corner territory and all sorts of things. But black, bottom line is black probably doesn't have enough ko threats to win this ko. So white's going to win that ko, and white's not going to connect it. White's not going to finish that ko very easily because white wants to keep fighting it. At this point, it's really close. I know that much, that it's really close. And so every move that they play, it's pretty important to try to play as many in-game points as possible because it's probably going to be a half-point difference. The J13 connection. Yes. Yes, I think that was important. And I don't think there was anything really dangerous at J15, even after that. Okay, black does not have enough ko-threats. So he's going to try to play 2 endgame moves in the process. Okay, looks like we have some... Are we really in the game variation? Let's just check that. Oh, no, we are. Yes. Okay. So KJ is probably out of time by now. He should be in overtime. So this is going to be forcing. Looks like he's playing it as a ko-threat. Okay, just to go back to this position again. So I think what W. Zhang is talking about here is, for instance, something like this. Well, you know, it's probably not worth it. It's probably not worth it, even if it was to work. So yeah. It's probably pretty close even in this case. I mean, sorry, like this and like this. It's probably pretty close. But I think this would have been better for white. Okay, back to the game. So they're still fighting the ko here. Black played this exchange. But black's not going to have enough ko-threats to win this ko. And white probably has to keep playing endgames while fighting it. So the ko is probably going to go on to the end of the game, or pretty close to the end of the game. When I'm watching these games, so that's a question by Rene Villarreal. Do you just feel it when the game is close? So like it's been close for a long time, and actually at this point I've sort of given up counting it. But I'm sort of talking from the knowledge of previous calculations. So like I've been counting it at various points in the game, and I have a pretty good idea of what the territory is like. And I know it's close. But if I seriously tried to calculate it, you wouldn't be getting very much commentary about the moves. So so that's why I'm sort of giving up here. I would turn quiet. So I'm not going to do that. But just from the sequence here and from what people are talking about, obviously I am looking at the comments where people give the computer scores and stuff like that. So it's been staying a half point throughout, and it seems to be no major mistakes. Okay, so black's played a normal endgame move. So this is just a 2 or 3 point move. So when I say 2 or 3 points, immediately it's just a 2 point difference. But if white had played this move, and then later on, at some point, white's going to play here, then eventually you see there's going to be an Atari here, which is going to force, after all the dames are filled, black's going to have to put one stone in there. So in most cases, it's actually a 3-point move because white 4 is a point that's just about, it's always going to be forcing. Like it's bigger than connecting. White 2 threatening to cut at 3 is bigger than connecting at 4. So it's forcing even now. So it's a 3-point move. So I should have just said maybe 3 points. Yeah. So this is still the tesuji here. And just forget the ko for the time being. We can say that if eventually this sequence is going to be forcing. So black has to answer like this, provided white can continue winning the ko. White probably wants to force it like this without connecting the ko. White does seem to have enough ko threats. Okay, so white has ko threats all over the place, but players like to play moves that are not only ko threats but sort of double as endgame moves. So, like for instance, this move here on the left side, this would be a forcing move, and it's also a 1-point endgame move, so it's sort of worth it. Or white might start from the corner and eventually be playing this anyway. So, moves like this, these are endgame moves that are also going to be, white can use them as ko threats. So typical moves that white would be playing while fighting this kind of ko. So like white also has, let's see, other ko threats like this in the center. Generally, since they wouldn't be played as endgame moves, sometimes white wants to save these moves for a final ko. Because when we get to a final ko, just before the dames are played, in such a case, white's already played these moves anyway. So white's going to play the moves that are endgame moves first and keep other ko threats for later. Okay, I can show the seki again. FGD, that is. So yeah, I actually showed that seki once before. But here, if black leaves it after white plays here, white can cover here. And just assuming that white's always going to win the ko, which is probably true at this stage of the game, I can just add 2 moves here. Black can no longer play an atari here because white's going to capture the 5 stones. Or, yeah, so this would be bad for black. It would be a loss. So black cannot do anything, and this turns into a seki. So the Chinese rules actually give black an extra stone here inside the black eye because it's a big eye. But that's not relevant. It's in the Korean rules. It's the same as Japanese rules, and this whole territory is turned into 0 points. So at some point, black has to back off and play. So yeah, black has to play here, and then has to capture these. So that's how the whole sequence here is working as a kind of a squeeze for white. Right. A Solon, that's right. In the territory scoring, the Japanese or Korean rules, throwing in there does lose a point. Doesn't make any difference in the Chinese rules. So yeah, this is a ko threat. It's a valid ko threat. White's going to answer that one. But white has more ko threats in the upper left corner. White has a lot of ko threats. White has some ko threats that white can play against black's group on the bottom. Ultimately, white is going to run out of ko threats. So that's why black is persistently playing the ko here. He wants white to be forced to connect it at some point. Even if white can win for the time being, black does want to force white to use up his ko threats, so that eventually white will have to connect there. Raventoe, that's correct. It is a 6.5 point komi. Clouden79, that's actually an interesting question. Do pros adjust their playstyle based on the rules being used? And like when earlier in this stream, I was talking about the Ing Cup rules. Oh, that's a tricky move. I'm not so sure about that one. Black cannot leave it. If black plays away. Okay, before I talk about the Ing rules, let's talk about this. So, this is so tricky. So if black plays away, white can cut here. Black has to capture it. So if black captures this side, white can play here and break in. So that would break into the black territory. If black captures here, white's going to play here and play here. And this is setting up a ko. So this would be bad for black. So black has to answer it. If black answers like this, that was an extra ko threat for white. And white's actually going to be play a lot of ko threats. This is going to increase the number of ko threats quite significantly. So yeah, so that's a kind of a problem for black. Black might try some different way of answering it, but in any case, that would give white extra ko threats. So if black wants to punish white for doing that, black might try this. The problem with this is that this whole black group is sort of cut off. And so when white plays down like this, or plays like this, it's going to cost black a lot of moves to capture these white stones. So that's what the whole thing is here. So it's a kind of a, oh, black did that anyway. So a tricky move. And so we'll see how, we'll see how this turns out, because it looks like black's going to end up putting some stones in there. If black answers here, if black now answers like this, it was probably an even trade. Close enough to an even trade. Although white still has ko threats with this move, and this move, and this move. So white gets a few extra ko threats. Kind of a potential squeeze there. So that was pretty tricky. And probably doesn't make much difference to the territory score. Okay, yeah, so we were talking about the question, do people change their playstyle depending on the rules? And when we first had the Ing Cup, the Japanese players and Korean players were not used to the idea of the 7.5 point komi that was being, it was equivalent to the 7.5 point komi that we say they have in Chinese rules, or the 3 3/4 of a stone. So it's the same thing as that, or it was 8 point. They called it 8 points, or 8. I think it was 8 points or something in the Ing Cup rules. It was the same thing, but it seemed like a huge komi. So there were a number of players who were, at the time, I think we were used to 5.5 points of komi. So there were a number of players who were actually changing the way they were playing. So they were changing their style, playing more aggressively with black, or playing more pacifically with white, because of the larger komi. So to a certain degree, yes. The answer to Clouden79, to pros, adjust their playstyle depending on the rules. Depending on the komi, yes. I think the difference between Japanese rules and Korean rules, for instance, in the way the game ends and stuff like that, it's a relatively minor difference. In special cases, it makes a difference in the result of the game. It has to be a special case, and it's part of our job. something professionals have to be able to do is to be able to know what those cases are and to be able to deal with that. So like sometimes there's a difference in how they fight the final ko or how they set up the end game in relation to that. So there are points in the game that are relevant, but it doesn't really change how we play the opening. That in itself does not change it. Okay, so we've had the ko is changed here, so kind of a sea change in the ko. White covered here, forcing black to add a stone, but black didn't yet. And white didn't play a ko threat. White actually didn't play a ko threat here. White played a big move, and black got to capture the ko again. The point is, white's going to win this ko anyway. So it's not an issue. White's going to win the ko anyway. White's going to play a ko threat now and it's going to be able to take back the ko. And when white does take back the ko, black cannot connect here, obviously, because this would be a ko for the life of the black group. So black's going to end up playing here, and white's going to win this ko anyway. White's going to be able to win this ko. So it was a tricky order of moves, but white's still going to be able to win the ko. It's a different ko now, but white will be able to win it. So yeah, so white played a ko threat here and took back the ko. Black does have a ko threat on the right side, cut on the second line. That's sort of black's, and black's going to cut at R9 and maybe have, yeah, if black's lucky, he has 2 or 3 ko threats. So if black cuts here, if white cuts here, that's just the 1 ko threat, but that gives black a 1-point move here. So it's it's more tricky if black cuts on this side. If white plays this way, black gets 2 more ko threats. Okay, black chose to play an endgame move. Once black has played this hane, he's going to connect after white covers. So white can cover here, and black's going to connect because taking would be sente for white. Or white can capture here, and black's going to answer that too. Black has to answer this one too. You might note that KJ chose to play an endgame move that is going to create ko threats at Q2, Q18, and R19. So he's playing the endgame move. It's the same size as some other moves on the board, but it's significant that black has created 2 ko threats locally. Okay, Turner87 is asking, do I remember how old I was the first time I played Go? And I was probably about 10 years old, but I don't know exactly. I started more than one time because my father would completely destroy me. And he taught me on the 19 by 19 board. Teaching on smaller boards was not a thing people did at the time. It wasn't a thing. And so he was teaching me on the 19 by 19 board, and most of my stones would die. So at that time, I would think maybe I'm not going to play the game again. And then it turned out in a week or so, I would start playing again. So I had a number of full starts, actually. But I ended up playing the game. So maybe 10 years old. But I don't know exactly. Okay, Bug Kitten in Twitch is asking a related idea. On the topic of pros changing their styles to fit rule sets, do you remember if the no-komi OTI games tended to have similar style to the historical no-komi games? So to a certain degree, it was kind of a style thing where the player with black had that choice. So the OTI was a ranking tournament in Japan. So, for instance, the way I got to 9 dan was that I was successful in the OTI. That was the tournament that determined my rank in the professional ranking system. So the Koreans and Chinese and Japanese both have that kind of a system, or had that kind of a system. The system actually changed in recent years in Japan, but when I became a 9-dan, we were still using the OTI. And it was no komi, and so the black player obviously had an advantage, but would get less points by winning. So if you were expected to win with black, but you got less of a reward for it, and it sort of averaged out that you had to win something like 75% of your games, or close to 80% actually, if you wanted to go as quickly as possible. So like a perfect record is the fastest way to promote, or otherwise, if you were winning about 4 more games, or a winning percentage of 60 to 70% would take a long time, but would eventually allow you to promote. So depending on your winning percentage, it was a point system, but related to a winning percentage. And yes, well, playing more cautiously with black was a thing that some people did, but you could play the modern style too. Since people took the newspaper tournaments, the sponsored tournaments, more seriously, people tended to just play the same style, even though there was no komi. Looks like they're wrapping up the game. It's still a half-point difference. I think the surefire, it might be a half-point win for white, but I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. And they're playing so quickly, I think we should just wait for the result. Oh, great. Matt. Okay, Stephen Radu is saying it's the first time I get to see a live stream with Michael. And big thank you. And thank you for coming. And don't forget to sign up to my channel, just to get notices when I'm going to do something. So I do have a lot of videos at my channel that you can look at. Hundreds of videos. And so signing up to my channel, I think it's worth it. Okay, black's played an Atari. We're sort of running out of moves. So there's a 1-point move on the bottom. Yeah, that one. And yes. And that's a 1-point move. And I guess we're pretty much finished. So they have some codes to finish now. Black has 5 code threats. White has 5 code threats. Looks like black might be winning by a code threat. Oh no, white has 6 code threats. 2. Okay, so they're gonna fight this ko. 3, 4, 5, 5. 1, 2. I'm having trouble counting now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah. Okay, black had 1 extra code threat. Yeah, I just managed to count it. Okay. So all they have to do now is fill the liberties. And it generally takes them some time to do that. So, yeah. So black had a 1 code threat advantage. So that's how moves like P19 here, they paid off. Black got that extra code threat. They're filling the liberties. So like when you do this, you might remember that if white plays the final move, then the number of stones they put on the board was an even number, because black has played the same number of moves as white. So when white fills the final dame, that means that the difference in the score is going to be an odd number, just because the stones placed on the board was an even number. We have 361 points to play, so that's how it works out. So if white plays the final dame, it means that it was a 7-point difference, maybe. So if it's a half-point difference, it's going to be a win for black. If black plays the final dame, then black played one extra move. It means that there's an odd number of stones that they placed on the board. And it means that the count of the territory as a whole is an even number. And so that means that if it's a half-point difference, it's going to be a win for white, because an even number is 6. Or 6 is an even number, I should say. So we have to, so they didn't finish filling the liberties, but if we just take this and fill the liberties here, maybe I can try to demonstrate that. So here, black fills the final liberty. If it's a half-point difference, that would indicate that it's going to be a win for white, because it's going to be an even number, and 6 is an even number. So if we simplify the position like this, this server actually can count it for us. So if we do that, it does give white a half-point win. Yeah. Oh, actually, they were pretty quick with giving the score here. So it's a half-point win for white. And yeah, so we can go back to the game. And that's it for today. So KJ was eliminated here. And China still has Gu Jihao. But Korea has... well, of course, Park still will be playing the next game. And even if Park loses, Korea has Byung Sang-gyo and Shin Jin-so. So Gu Jihao will have to win 2 games to take it to the final game. It turns out this week I have a tournament game of my own. So I won't be able to cover the next 2 games, I don't think. But if Gu Jihao wins 2 games and gets to the final game, maybe I'll do Friday. So watch out for that. You can probably follow game at various places. So you can look it up on the internet, and there's sites that show you the results and stuff like that. So maybe the final game, if they get that far. So thank you all for watching to the end. And this will be saved at my YouTube site, so you can go back and watch again for parts that you didn't see. And I hope you all enjoyed it. So thank you for coming. And that's it for this stream. Thank you all, and goodbye.